I want to concentrate on the situation in Syria now, where the United Nations and President Putin of Russia have called for a pause in the fighting around the rebel-held suburb of Damascus, eastern Ghouta. More than 500 people have apparently been killed in airstrikes there in the past week. Well, with me now is Baf al-Talabani, a former commander of the Iraqi Kurdish Peshmerga counter-terrorism forces and the son of the late Iraqi President Jalal Talabani. Very good evening to you, Mr. Talabani. Your reflection, first of all, on what it tells us, the assault on eastern Ghouta, about the brutality and the strength of the Assad regime at the moment.
I think what's happening there is going to turn into a massive humanitarian crisis. As Kurds, we're very familiar with this kind of incident, and I think really anything that can get the international community in there as soon as possible to deliver some humanitarian aid has to be encouraged.
But, I mean, there seems to be no boundaries there, doesn't there? Again, as I know, Kurdish forces have been aware of the indiscriminate bombing, the barrel bombs, and then reports today of the use of chlorine gas.
Yes, we are definitely seeing an escalation, and this is an escalation that really I think the international community needs to deal with quickly and decisively.
I mean, part of the analysis, now let's broaden this out, part of the analysis, and bring in Iraq, of course, which you know an awful lot about
yes,
as well. I mean, part of the analysis is that Assad gets stronger as those that oppose him are defeated, and in particular that IS, Daesh, are on the run, have been almost wiped out. Is that the case in your analysis?
This is a huge danger for us to think this. We're seeing conflict between the Turks and some of the Kurdish forces, and I think all of these things are a distraction. The war against ISIS is far from over. We're giving an opportunity for them to reorganize, we're giving an opportunity for them to be stronger, and we will see the emergence of an ISIS 2.0.
Well, we talked, a few years back, didn't we? And
yes, sir.
You talked then of a little heard of organisation in this country, IS I'm referring to, and the dangers that posed. Just remind us of what you told me back then.
You were kind enough to give us a voice then, and we talked about the conflict and the issues we were facing in Kurdistan, and how if we didn't stop them, they would come to Europe, they would come to the United States. And many other organisations laughed at that, but unfortunately within months we saw these attacks, and I'm worried again that now we are concentrating on other things, we're relaxing, we think the war with ISIS is finished, and it's not. We're seeing in Iraq now, with the issues between the Kurds in Erbil and Baghdad, the disputed areas have a huge vacuum. We're seeing huge movements of Daesh, ISIS. We're seeing the emergence of an ISIS 2.0, and we expect more asymmetrical warfare, more terrorism. And again, I'm seeing the movements now, the very things we were worried about so many years ago.
It's interesting what you say there, because, you know, again, the analysis is after the assaults on the IS strongholds over the last year or so, is that the caliphate is destroyed, the territory's gone, and that IS will morph into a different force. And
absolutely.
As fighters return to European countries they've come from, for instance, yes, there will be more attacks. But you're suggesting as well that the territory is still available in Iraq.
Even if territory isn't so much available in Iraq, I think that there will still be attacks. And there is now, unfortunately, in Iraq, there is a vacuum that they can exploit. And the worst case scenario of that being exactly what you alluded to, of territory being available to them.
So just tell me about the vacuum they are exploiting. Is it still surrounding, closely connected to the disaffection of large parts of the Sunni population?
Absolutely. The Sunni matter needs to be at least resolved as soon as possible. But what we're seeing immediately as a threat now is the situation between the Kurdistan regional government and the Baghdad government is such that the Kurdish security forces that are used to dealing with this threat, that have been very successful in this threat, in the so-called disputed areas, are no longer there. And what we're having now in these areas is a complete vacuum. We're seeing movements of Daesh, of ISIS, we're seeing restructuring, reorganizing, and I'm expecting a wave of terrorist attacks in all of these regions. And that will simply destabilize, first of all, Iraq, and then the Middle East further. And as they become more proficient as this kind of attack, I'm afraid to say we face again the potential of increased attacks in Europe.
And in your analysis then, does it need more Western, more coalition military engagement? Because we've seen over the last, if we take in Afghanistan as well, we've seen over the last 17 years engagement, withdrawal, and then re-engagement. It's happened in Iraq as well. Is this got to happen for a third time in Iraq?
I'm hoping at this moment, no. All we need to do is return stability to those areas that have a vacuum. So get the Iraqis and the Kurds talking again. The international community has to play a leading role. Great Britain can play a massive role in this. And normalizing the security situation in those areas will make it a lot more difficult for Daesh to get strong again in these areas and create these attacks.
But is there will on both sides? You mentioned there the Iraqi government, the Kurds. Is there the will? Certainly you will tell me on the Kurdish side. What about the Iraqi government?
I assure you there's will on the Kurdish side, sir. My concern is that with the looming Iraqi elections, maybe in Baghdad there are other priorities. And absolutely there's bad will between Erbil and Baghdad, but my concern is that we face a threat, a security threat. This really needs to be addressed and can't wait till after the elections.
Well, you were very prescient when we talked about 4 years ago. Let's hope you are wrong this time. Bafel Talabani, very good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.